Neil Hamilton.
I don't think I could improve upon the devastating demolition which Adam Price conducted of the government's case on this. So I shan't even attempt to do that, but I hope I'll be able to add to it. This is, in addition, a devastating blow to industrial confidence in Wales, and I can't think that any potential investor in future could rely upon the word of a government minister in this administration. The Circuit of Wales developers have been led up the garden path numerous times and encouraged to believe that a project which we now know, in the government's estimation, was flawed from the very beginning, was a practical possibility. What have they been doing for the last 3 to 7 years, as we've been through endless due diligence exercises for different reasons, if the most elementary point of all was missed by civil servants in the Welsh Government and by ministers who ought to know better? We heard from the Finance Secretary this morning in the Finance Committee that he was well familiar with the problems of classification under ONS rules and indeed the Treasury guidelines. Of course he was. And previous finance ministers too. The whole Cabinet should be aware of this because it's a problem which has arisen in many different directions, including in the last year in relation to housing associations and social housing projects generally. If it really were the case that this problem was fatal to the project, then that should have been recognised right from the start, and £50 million would not have been wasted by the private sector developers, and £10 million of taxpayers' money wasted by the Welsh Government in the development funding which they've provided. So I think that this is a major scandal which requires to be investigated independently, and I fully support the 2 amendments which Plaid Cymru have put down. I give way to Adam Price.
I'm interested to know as well that in an exchange with me on the 8th of February 2017, when I asked the Cabinet Secretary whether the 2 sets of criteria, you will recall that he set down to take the project to the final stage, was the 50% level of guarantee and of the debt and the risk met, and also the investor term sheets. And he said to me, according to my officials, it does appear that the criteria have been met.
And I can supplement that further with another statement which occurred in the Cabinet Secretary's most recent statement to this Assembly, where he said also that the level of financial risk borne by the private sector being less than 50%, explained that this is because the £210 million underwriting element would carry a higher risk than the other parts of the financing package, which can't possibly be true, because there's £48 million of equity risk here, which is not protected at all and goes down the plug hole if the project fails, and also another £47 million of debt, which is subordinated to the government's own guarantee. So that was a factual inaccuracy as well on top. I don't even understand where the £375 million debt figure itself arises from, but that's a point of detail which we can explore on another occasion. But the fundamental absurdity of the situation we now find ourselves in is that the government is not asked to put in a single penny up front by way of investment funding for this project, although out of the back pocket, as I described it in First Minister's questions yesterday, a description which the First Minister demurred at, we now know that that is provided out of the general reserve of the government, which is, I think, fairly described as the back pocket. We didn't know this £100 million was nestling there undisturbed and available for any wizard scheme which could be dreamed up at 5 minutes' notice to be blown on a project for which there are currently no takers. And if ever there were a case of due diligence which needs to be done, it's into the project which the government now is proposed not only to put in a contingent liability, but an actual liability for the next 10 years, which itself will be at the expense of schools and hospitals and all the other things that they claim not to be able to finance if they went ahead with the Circuit of Wales project. So we now are spending, as I described it last week, shed loads of money on a collection of empty sheds, rather than having a world-class racing circuit on the back of which, as Adam Price rightly said, we might be able to attract as a cluster a number of automotive companies to take advantage of the celebrity which that potentially can bring. Why would they come to an empty site in Ebbw Vale with nothing that relates to what they intend to do there? So I do believe that this government has not just failed the people of Ebbw Vale, but failed the people of Wales. And after 20 years, I think we've seen enough of this government, and it's time that they went.